But right here, buddy, that's a tattoo.
Wow, that's David Dunham.
Fact or fiction?
Eric Dungey had no chance away. Flips it to Watkins again.
This is the Nachos Analysis College Football Show, presented by Pump Monkey Septic Services.
Welcome to Season 2, Episode 8 of the Nachos Analysis College Football Show. Today is Thursday, October 12th. The Tigers moved to 4-2 on the season with a 17-12 victory over Wake Forest Saturday in Death Valley. I'm your host, Drew Archer, and I'm joined by my co-host, Matthew Johnson. How's it going, Matthew?
It is going good. It was a great weekend, an ugly win, but a great weekend overall. So...
Yeah, we're going to get into this game, and I did see someone note on Twitter. It was an ugly game. It was frustrating at times, but then when you get back to the house and you watch the way that Miami lost, the way that Notre Dame lost, I take an ugly win over a loss like that. So, yes, the Tigers moved to 4-2. They get to a much-needed bye week. But Episode 8, let's get into some show topics. On today's show, we're going to break down the Wake Forest matchup, as well as some of the other notable games from this past weekend. No Twitter poll this week. Matthew and I are recording earlier in the week. Didn't get a chance to get that out. But we do have a guest this week. Larry Williams, writer for Tiger Illustrated and host of the Clemson Dubcast, will join us on this episode. We'll also do Fact or Fiction, review our picks from last week, as well as give out our picks for this week. And then with it being a bye week and we're halfway through the season, I thought it'd be fun for Matthew and I to go back and revisit our preseason picks and see which of those were busts and which ones of those are still alive. So big episode heading into the bye week. But the Tigers escape with a victory. 17-12, a score. Gami, I don't know if you saw that, Matthew.
I didn't see that, but I guess it's not surprising. 12's a pretty weird number to get. But yeah, I mean, the game was okay. I felt like Clemson was in a pretty dominant position for most of the game, even though the scoreboard never really reflected that. But I did want to point out that TJ Parker, I know I pointed this out to you at the game, but TJ Parker and Peter Woods started this week, which we mentioned, I believe, in our week 1 episode, that we need these two to be starting before, a little bit before this point, but, you know, a week or two off. We're pretty close. I mean, the only thing that comes to mind when I think about this game is the awful roughing the passer calls. And if you were in the stadium, I mean, even I rewatched the broadcast and you could hear the boos for 30 minutes after on the broadcast too, but it was really bad. I'm going to put a video up on the screen of, I had forgotten while rewatching the game that in the first quarter, Jeremiah Trotter had another roughing the passer call, which was equally as bad. Maybe not as bad, but really bad. Quarterback didn't even go to the ground. Jeremiah Trotter just kind of jumps up to make a play on the ball, comes down and like taps the quarterback. The quarterback doesn't fall down or get pushed or anything. He just stands there and takes it, and it's a flag for some reason. So that one's pretty frustrating. I was really mad. Can't remember the last time I've been that mad at a Clemson football game. I don't know about you, Drew.
Yeah, by that time I was at Backstreets in downtown, but that was so obvious, even just on TV. And those boos you mentioned, you could hear those over the loud noise in Backstreets at the time, in between plays and stuff. Those boos got cranked up.
Oh yeah, it was. It reminded me a lot of the 2016 Pittsburgh game. If anybody was at that game, there was a sequence, probably the entire third quarter, pretty much, where Clemson would get Pitt down to 3rd and long, and then on 3rd and long, get some stupid penalty, and it was either like pass interference, roughing the passer, defensive holding, something like that would extend the Pitt drive, and the boos were very close to that level on Saturday. So,
fans are committed to the boo on a bad call.
Which, I mean, that one was really bad. So I was leading the charge from the top of the stadium. One thing I wanted to point out also that I noticed from the game is the Shipley and Cade are just not on the same page, and they haven't really been all year. You have multiple miscues handoffs on the read option plays where neither of them knows who's getting the ball. And there's even that one play, I know we referenced it in our family group message, but the play where Cade starts the kind of play with Shipley and pistol and then motions him to the side, and then Shipley goes back to pistol, or there's some kind of miscommunication. You can tell while they're running the play that something's not right. And then they run the play and Shipley gets up and starts yelling at Cade. So I'm not sure who's at fault there.
If I remember correctly, I don't think Shipley was set and we got a penalty there, and I think that's what he was upset about if I'm thinking of the right play.
I don't know if the penalty was on Shipley, but I know there might have been a penalty that play because I think you're right. We had just got down to like a goal line situation and then had a penalty that backs us up, and we end up kicking a field goal on this possession. So there's another play I'm going to put up on the screen. And my point for this one is that we've talked about this on the podcast, but we have the talent to be a top 10 team in the country. It's pretty baffling what we do sometimes. Like, sometimes it just doesn't make any sense. There's this one play, I can't remember the situation, but we have it's a fake screen and Cade rolls out, and then the play is designed to throw back across the body, which if anybody has played quarterback from 8 years old and up, first thing you were probably taught is never throw back across your body. The side that Cade is rolling out to on this play, Troy Stellato is not looking for the ball. The only people looking for the ball are on the other side of the field, and Cade throws back across the body. It's like the play was designed to do that, and it's just this pass was almost picked off by 2 Wake Forest players. So it was maybe the worst play design I've ever seen. It just doesn't make any sense. There's also another play where we pass the ball on 3rd and 1, and another sequence that I'll put a clip up for where we have the ball 2nd and 4 around the midfield point and throw the ball 2 times in a row. Obviously we didn't. Well, we called a pass play, but Cade kind of escaped on the one that I'm talking about and picked up the first down and improvised for it. But just play calling wise, it doesn't make any sense when you have a powerhouse running back duo in the backfield, 2nd and 4, and we're not even going to give a chance to run the ball for the first down. So I'm pretty baffled with some of those calls, but I will say on a good note, the defense played a great game. Secondary strength again. I think everybody in the secondary played great. The only person I could pick out that maybe could have had a better game was Jaden Lucas, but I think he still played really well overall. So I think Wes Goodwin is the exception to the rule that Clemson is a poorly coached team. And I know this is one point that you'll like a lot, Drew, the wrapping up. And Drew's mentioned this to me during games multiple times this year. And I think our biggest culprit of it is Toriano Pride. I have not seen Toriano Pride wrap up on the first hit one time this season.
My biggest pet peeve is tackling 101. See what you're tackling and wrap up.
There's a specific play I'm thinking about where they throw it to Toriano Pride's receiver on like a hitch route, and Toriano Pride comes and hits him really hard, but just like ducks his head and doesn't wrap up, and the guy shakes it off. But we luckily had another tackler right around there that was able to bring him down. But you can see right after that play, Nick Eason, I believe it is, walk like straight up to him on the sideline and be like, shoot your arms. Like, we should have been teaching this all off season.
Yeah. Halfway through the season, it's might be a little too late there. No, I agree with you. I don't really have any complaints on the defense. I like what they did Saturday, other than was that the final drive that Wake Forest scored on. They gave up a little bit there, but overall, they had a great performance. And if you look at the offensive drives and stats and that kind of stuff, the first quarter was the worst of it. And then after halftime, you get a heavy dose of Shipley and Maffa, and the stats don't look half bad.
Yeah, well,
But it
on
was
that
just
point, sorry to
frustrating.
cut you off, but on that point, I had another screenshot from the game, that a graphic they put up on the screen. I believe this was sometime close to the fourth quarter, but it showed Will Shipley on the day at this point had 19 rushes for 97 yards, averaging 5.1 a carry, but he had 86 of those 97 yards in the second half.
Yep.
Yeah, that's all I have to say.
And I was like, it was just baffling. Like the struggles you had early in the first half took till the second half for them to say, all right, we're gonna hand the ball off to Shipley here. But I don't know. The game in general, it just kind of put me in a mood for the entire weekend. And Cowboys mess around and get killed by the 49ers last night, and I'm just not a happy football fan this weekend. But I mean, hey, I'm happy to get a win this weekend. I'm excited for a bye week. It'll be nice to watch stress-free football coming up, and not have to worry about, is Clemson going to take a step forward or are they going to take a step backwards? But just happy to get out of this game with a win.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, this was one of those games that we might have thought, I know you had said at one point in the season that this was one of our games we don't really have to worry about. So let me ask you now, how are you feeling about the rest of the season?
I don't know. After the way the coaching blunder at Miami, that game doesn't seem quite as difficult coming out of the bye week. If Mario Cristobal can't figure out how to take a knee, which I was listening to the Mickey Plyler show, almost every game this season that they've had the game in hand, they don't take knees, they run the ball. And he had the same exact thing happen to his team in Oregon. They were up 3. I think it was less than a minute. They could have taken a knee. I think it was second down, and Stanford had one more timeout. They could take a knee, make Stanford burn the timeout, and then take another knee to finish the game. They fumble the ball. Stanford ends up driving down and winning the game. So if that same coach doesn't change it up at his late in the game clock management, I like Clemson's chances.
Yeah, but I guess if that were to be the case, that means Miami would have to have the ball leading in the fourth quarter, which I don't know if it... I think Clemson will have the ball leading in the fourth quarter and do a play call or like a clock management mistake. But maybe it'll just be like back and forth, and it'll be like 45 minutes for the last minute, and it's just like us turning the ball over back and forth. Like nobody wants to win.
It's very believable with the way Clemson handles the ball at times. But head coach Dabo Swinney, he earned his 165th career win to tie college football Hall of Famer Frank Howard. That Miami game, he will get the chance to break Frank Howard's record. The Tigers improved to 71-17 with one tie all-time against Wake Forest. Clemson allowed 0 points off of its 2 offensive turnovers. The turnovers were frustrating this week, but the fact that they limited Wake Forest to 0 points off of those was huge, because the Tigers have given up 43 points so far this season off of 8 turnovers in 5 games prior to that. They held Wake Forest to 239 yards with 12 points after surrendering 447 yards and 45 points to Wake Forest last season. Granted, there was a much better quarterback and some players around him last year. The Tigers outgained Wake Forest 338 yards to 239, and has outgained its opponents in total yards in 7 consecutive games for the first time since 2020. Cade Klubnik was 18 for 28 with 131 passing yards. He also rushed for 48 yards on 12 attempts and a touchdown. After Wake Forest opened the scoring, Clemson responded with a 7-yard touchdown run by Klubnik in the second quarter. The touchdown was Klubnik's 5th of his career and his career high 3rd of the season. Running back Will Shipley rushed 19 times for 97 yards, like you mentioned, also with a touchdown. In the first quarter, Clemson held Wake Forest to no points on a turnover on downs on a drive that started at the Clemson 9-yard line following a lost fumble. It marked Clemson's first time holding an offense without points on a drive that started in Clemson's own red zone following a turnover since 2019 against Syracuse. So that was about it.
Yeah, I mean,
for that on the game.
Yeah, that play that you were just mentioning, where we had the miscue handoff and gave them the ball inside the 10, that's just impressive stand by the defense there to keep us in the game. And there were a few times where defense had to hold up in the red zone goal-to-go situations to keep us in the game and give our offense another chance to possibly put up a point. So,
yeah. And then that play all around was just frustrating. But from where we were sitting in the stadium, it looked like Cade just was waiting too long to make a decision whether he was going to pull it or not.
Yeah, that's what I saw on the replay. And this is your number one running back and your QB1, and they can't get the read option right in weeks 6 or 7 of the season. So I think you're right, though, that Cade was taking a little too long. Maybe he got inspired by watching the Wake Forest offense in that slow RPO. he thought that was us.
Yeah, that was one of the perks of leaving and going watching the game downtown at Backstreets. I got a better zoomed in view of watching Wake Forest offense, and it's just amazing to watch how close up to the line of scrimmage he'll get before he'll throw the ball in that offensive system.
Yeah, they even added a wrinkle. I don't remember them running too often in the past, but where they'll kind of fake the RPO and then have the quarterback sneak up even closer to the line and then like do a little pop pass almost. I think that's what you're probably referring to, but I don't really remember that type of wrinkle from the Wake Forest offense before. So it went okay. I mean, we got out with the win, but it was not pretty, and this should not have been that close.
No, I think it was a 21-point spread, if I remember correctly. Was a lot closer than it should have been, especially when you mention the talent that this team has is top 10 in talent in the nation and struggling the way we are on a consistent basis. And I don't know, maybe it just feels more frustrating because with each week this season you've seen improvement, and then this week it's almost like you took 2 steps back, heading into a bye week where you wanted to kind of carry some momentum, and now it's a little bit more I don't know, the fan base seems a little more frustrated and somber, and after all the ground you gained against Syracuse last week.
Yeah, I'm starting to think Dabo listens to our podcast and gets fired up when we're talking trash, and then when we have a good game and we're all gung-ho about the team, then they get a little too full of themselves.
It just might. Dabo Sweeney, Nachos and Analysis fan.
Well, since you're listening, come on the episode next week.
Yeah, hop on with us. Some other notable games. I know you said you didn't really watch much football Saturday. At the tailgate, we watched the Texas-Oklahoma game. Huge win for Brent Venables, his first top 10 victory as a head coach at Oklahoma. I think I said to y'all before the game started at the tailgate, I was like, I don't know. I'm kind of worried that Oklahoma might get embarrassed here, but Texas made some big mistakes, and Oklahoma capitalized on them. And happy for Brent Venables.
Yeah, I like it. This was probably the only game I watched other than the Clemson game on Saturday. But like you said, it's good to see Brent Venables see some success, and we're not done talking about Brent Venables this episode just yet. Wait till the end.
Another game of note, Notre Dame, they fall to Louisville. Kind of regretting not taking the Louisville over in season win total in the preseason. Kicking myself for taking South Carolina. We'll talk about that later, but a big win for Louisville. They're in the driver's seat to Charlotte in the ACC championship right now.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to our fact or fiction from last week about Louisville. If they're the second best team in the ACC, they're definitely better than what I gave them credit for last week. I'll say they've moved up to third or fourth best team in the ACC in my eyes this week. You still got Florida State, Duke, Clemson, and Louisville.
No Clemson this year.
Well, I mean, Clemson
Sorry. I thought you were talking about Louisville's schedule.
Oh no, sorry. I was just mentioning some other teams that I think are competing with Louisville for that, or Louisville and Florida State for those top few spots in the ACC. So I think Clemson's still competing. We kind of tend to play down to our competition or play up to whoever we're playing. So let's just hope that continues when we play some of our good teams on this tough back half of the schedule.
Yeah, it's definitely we got a handful of games. There are going to probably be some battles. Notre Dame suffering its second loss of the season. If the Tigers win that at home, not as big of a win as it would have been had they not dropped this game to Louisville. But we got some tough games coming up.
Yeah, and speaking of a handful, you don't want to be having a handful when your septic tank goes down. If you don't know, our sponsor of this episode is Pump Monkey Septic Service, but if you get caught in a septic tank issue, you might have a handful of crap. But luckily we have the solution for you.
Absolutely. So on the way to the tailgate Saturday, I actually helped Pump Monkey. He had some parts delivered to me in Greenville. I swung by and dropped them off up there for him in Clemson. But septic tank issues are not something you want to have to deal with. So Pump Monkey Septic Service in Clemson, owned and operated by Clemson alumni Alan Powell. Give them a phone call at 864-710-2211. They're on Facebook. They're on Instagram. I never thought I would follow a septic tank company on Instagram, but content is content. So give them a call, 864-710-2211. When the dump's funky, call Pump Monkey. All right, before we get to Fact or Fiction, after a couple weeks off without a guest, we are going to be joined by Larry Williams, writer for the Tiger Illustrated and host of the Clemson Dubcast. So hope y'all enjoy. All right, today we are joined by writer for Tiger Illustrated and host of the Clemson Dubcast, Larry Williams. Thanks for joining the show today, Larry.
Happy to do it, man. Thank you.
Yeah. Second time on the show. I think the last time we spoke was leading into the Orange Bowl last year. Didn't quite go the way the Tigers wanted it, but I have to start off with a new favorite thing of mine on Tiger Illustrated is your Monday night Dabo Swinney call-in show thread. This week was the first week that I read through it. My uncle was like, "You have got to start reading these, and you have to ask Larry about it when you have him on." But how did you come up with that idea? Because it's pure gold, it's pure entertainment.
Well, I don't think it's a novel idea in general because you see people elsewhere, whether I think maybe one or two people, some people like live tweet it. I think maybe maybe John Blau, the Post and Courier, has done that. And then on other people who cover other teams, you see they monitor what is said. But I literally got the idea. This was the Monday after the Duke game. Well, not the Monday after the Duke game because they played on a Monday. But whenever the show was after the Duke game, I guess maybe it was on like a Wednesday or something like that, a Thursday. I was like walking my dog at like 7 o'clock, so an hour before it started. And I said, people are so interested in everything Dabo Swinney says. Like, why aren't we doing more justice to him being there for an hour on the radio and fielding questions from these fascinating callers? Usually it's the same callers. And so I was like, what if I just came up with some goofy, bogus sponsor, every week? And so the first one, I believe it was brought to you by my good friends at Zima, and it was just something, just messing around. And then when they played at Syracuse, or I guess when they played Florida State, the sponsor was U-Haul, for, so maybe speculation about moving. And then when they played at Syracuse, it was the Paul's Boutique. I don't know if you're a Beastie Boys fan, but one of the all-time great albums was Paul's Boutique, which was the follow-up to License to Ill back in the mid to late 80s. And I said, and Paul's Boutique was a men's clothing store in Brooklyn, or I guess maybe fictitious, I don't know. But I was like, if any of y'all who are going up to Syracuse and who are stopping through in New York City for a long weekend, be sure to go to Brooklyn and stop at this awesome men's clothing store, our good friends at Paul's Boutique. And, just kind of a spoof. And I had a picture of the album cover, which was that men's clothing store at the top of the thread. And then some people are like, man, that's pretty cool. You got a sponsor in New York. And I'm just like, that's not real. But the greatest thing that happened this past week was somebody said, how can I become a sponsor? And I said, oh, you mean like a real live sponsor? Just send me a direct message. And so I had like three or four direct messages over the next day or so. And then, but this past Monday, we actually have our first sponsor of that thread is a guy in real estate in Powdersville, Dan Bracken. And so I don't know, man, it's just been this organic thing. There's something about like listening to the coach's show is entertaining by itself, as I think everybody knows, because you're just like, wow, just funny interactions, between the callers and Don and Dabo. But there's something about seeing it written, like a transcription of the give and take, just takes it to a whole other level. And so if you said you saw it for the first time this past week, you saw the best one, because it was a riot. I mean, you had bubble screen Becky, she turned 80 last week, and Dabo said, yeah, did you know?
That's what got me. The Dick Butkus comment is what got me.
I'm not making light of R.I.P. Dick Butkus, but he said, Dick Butkus died last week at age 80. And I know that's not, Dabo wasn't trying to say, beware, Becky. But anyway, so it became a fun thing right off the bat, and I didn't know people were going to enjoy it as much as they have. And so now it's appointment listening and typing for me every Monday. So I really enjoy it.
Yeah, like I said, this past week was my first time reading it. It will definitely be something I will be doing every Monday going forward. So in addition to Tiger Illustrated, you also host the Dubcast. And one of my favorite things about your show is when you have different writers and media personalities, you ask them the inside baseball questions or the behind the scenes kind of stuff. And Matthew and I do this kind of as a hobby, but you're someone obviously who's made a career out of it, and hearing those stories about what goes on behind the scenes for people covering a team or athletics in general has always fascinated me. What does a week in Larry Williams' shoes look like covering this Clemson program?
Well, first of all, thank you for being interested. I mean, I never take it lightly that, of course, I'm interested in the inside baseball and the process of other writers, because that's my industry, and I've always been fascinated by it. It's one of the reasons I got into it to begin with, was just like, wow, wait a minute, those guys sitting up there, they do this for a living, really, and so anyway, I'm just always flattered, when fans, are also have that much interest in the process and the daily lives of the people who are doing this every day. So it's just a cool thing, I guess is what I'm saying. A week during the season, let's see. So today is a Wednesday, and well, I think I shared this with you before you hit record, but I recorded a podcast this morning with Jad Dean, the former kicker, and it was an incredible conversation, an hour and 20 minutes. And I go to import it into my computer after we finish, so I can put the finishing touches on it with editing and all that, and then publish it. And for the first time in 5 years of doing the podcast, I opened the folder and the file was just not there. It was corrupted or something. And so now I have to do the call of shame tomorrow back to Jad and have the same conversation. So today was a bit of that kind of throws you a curveball and throws you for a loop, because I do the podcast sort of on my own time. Like, I'm not required to do that for Tiger Illustrated. I just I do that on the side. And so I try to be as efficient as possible when I'm doing that. And so that usually only takes me, you just do the math, a little over an hour for each of the conversations. They usually run about that long. And then about 20 or 30 minutes editing and then publishing it. So doesn't take long at all. So pretty efficient. I guess I should probably start on game day, maybe. Basically, as I'm watching the game, I mean, and I'm not like most fans. I can't go tailgate and drink beer and have fun. I've had that question a lot. They're like, "What do you do before the game? Are you like the rest of us, like eating wings, drinking beer?" And it's like, no, I can't do that. I mean, I would love to do that, but I would probably be pretty bad at my job if I did do that, because I have to, then sit there for 3.5 hours and, just kind of in deep concentration, just trying to pick up on the most important themes and developments. And I'm trying to listen if there's a good analyst who's broadcasting the game on TV. I'm listening to him and just trying to pick up things. And because I love football, but it's so fast that it takes me rewinding a few times on a crucial play to figure out, okay, what exactly was the focal point or the crucial point of this play. And so during the game, I'm just sort of in the press box, not really saying a whole lot, and just trying to process each play, trying to diagnose, sort of key developments, and then using my binoculars to look at the sideline and just try to pick up on body language and who Dabo might be yelling at or whoever, things like that, injuries and such. So after the final buzzer sounds on the game, I'm usually writing. I'm spending about 25 minutes writing my game column. I like to just get that out as quickly as possible, and that's of course without any quotes or anything like that. It's just my instant sort of take on what I just saw. And then I pack everything up in the press box and walk down to Dabo's press conference. Sometimes I'll go and do player interviews after the game, but it's such a mob scene usually with so many media people and cameras jockeying for position that it's hard to really get and to really talk to a player like I like to, which is basically just like sort of, conversational and just, having a back and forth. It's just kind of frenzied. And so what's usually most efficient for me is I will just go straight to the auditorium where they have Dabo's press conference in the West End Zone. And Dabo takes so long to go from the field where they do the gathering at the Paul and all that to the locker room, where of course his speech probably lasts a lot longer than most coaches. Then he goes and showers and does all that, which I'm not complaining, because it gives me time when I get to the auditorium to sit and write what we are going to publish first thing Sunday morning. And that is a roundtable that features Paul Strelo and I sort of giving our extended takes on the game and maybe turning the page forward. So I'm able to do that usually by the time Dabo's press conference even starts. And then his press conference comes, and that usually lasts about a half hour or so. So it's usually well over 2 hours after the game ends that I'm walking out of the stadium, and that's when I'm able to maybe eat some wings and and drink a beer and behave like most fans do before the game. Then Sunday, it's usually, so my responsibility on Sunday is then having another sort of reflective takeaway or column on the game and sort of the state of the program type of thing that usually runs in the afternoon. I like to usually do that sometime in the morning after I wake up, because my process is I am at my peak level of brain function in the morning, and it could be 5 in the morning. I'm an early bird. I love having my coffee, and I'm able to think straight. I'm organized. And so usually, no matter the day, whether it's during weekdays or whatever, I do my most work early in the morning, and then on up into late morning. And then after I eat lunch, man, I'm pretty much toast as far as the way my brain is functioning. Not that I'm not still doing some work in the afternoons, but in terms of the peak function as far as I go, it's usually ideally in the mornings. And so I'm trying to watch the game back, because like I said earlier, I just have to be there to sit there and rewind like over and over on a lot of those plays, because they happen so quickly. So then I'm taking notes on that. And then I'm also trying to watch other games, trying to catch up on games that I've missed, just because I love college football. Some of the bigger games nationally. I'm usually doing that through most of the week, just catching up on other games. Like just yesterday, I watched the Alabama Texas A&M game, just out of curiosity. I'm also trying to watch games of featuring teams that Clemson is going to play in the future. So Sunday's generally pretty busy. And then Dabo has his teleconference at 6:00 on Sunday evenings. And so I usually try to participate in that. Then Monday we have mostly player press conference type things Monday morning over there at Dabo Land at the football facility. Sometimes we have the coordinators. Dabo has reduced the access of the coordinators to 4 times this season. And so this week was when I think was the 3rd time we had Wes Goodwin and Garrett Riley this season, I believe. Tuesday is Dabo's press conference day. Wednesday is today, of course. I'm usually trying to, what I like, excuse me, ideally I'm getting a ton of work done on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday to where I can be a little laid back on Thursday and Friday, hopefully take Friday off. It usually almost never works that way, because there's always something that happens, some news event. Like tomorrow, the basketball team is having a practice that's open to the media on Thursday afternoon, so I'm certainly going to go over for that. But it's basically the season. I love the season because there's a rhythm that you get into. You pretty much know what you're going to be doing each day, and that's different from, say, mid-April to August, when you're having to come up with just about everything you write. It's sort of ideas and extended series and things like that, that you can sort of sink your teeth into. But I love the rhythm of a football week, mainly because I love college football and I love studying it, and also because there's always something to write about, man. Like this is my 20th season doing it, and I'm almost surprised that I'm still excited. I'm as excited to write about college football as I was 15 years ago. And when I stop being excited, when it starts to be a chore or feel like, more of like a job, then maybe that's time to do something else. But I'm still, it's always interesting. And a big part of that, of course, is the head coach of Clemson is almost always interesting. It could be a lot worse, with some other coaches out there who, they're not interested. I mean, their main objective is to give you as little as possible, whether it's info on the team or insight into stories or whatever. Whereas Dabo I think he's available to us like 4 times a week, and he's always approachable and always willing to expand on something, no matter what, any topic under the sun. So I don't know if I really covered that, but I've talked for a long time on that topic. So I think that probably gives you a pretty good idea.
No, that's a great answer. Another part of your position there at Tiger Illustrated, you're on the message boards a lot. And obviously the big topic of discussion as of late has been conference realignment and that kind of stuff. And I feel like on a almost daily basis see you fielding questions and who knows when, where, that kind of thing. What's it like trying to manage that? Presumably there's some move coming at some point, and fans want, like I think you mentioned before we started recording, fans want answers now. How do you kind of balance that and waiting if you do hear something, knowing when the right time to say something, and what is that part of the job like?
It's tricky because I think sort of another inside baseball thing is you never write every single thing, and that could be whether if I'm interviewing you for a feature article or something, and I'll know I did a good job if I still have 5 pages of notes from my interview with you that I didn't use, because that means I was thorough in learning about your life story or whatever. I think it somewhat also applies to when you're reporting on a big story, whether it's a coaching search or conference realignment or something like that, or injuries, I don't share every single thing I know about injuries because if I did, I would no longer have information about injuries. And so just to give you an example, last week, a big question going to the Wake Forest game was, are Antonio Williams and Nate Wiggins going to be available? Are they going to play? And so I'm just, based on what I told you, I can't burn, people who I've talked to. I'm not going to put it out there like in neon lights, with a story, Wiggins and Williams out for Saturday or unlikely to play Saturday. But my sort of strategy with that is on the message board in the ongoing conversation, somebody asked me about it, I'd say, I'd be surprised if they played. And that's enough, right? That gives you a sense of, okay, and so as it happened, they actually dressed out and they were pretty close, but neither of them played. And so I'm just giving you an example of, I can't, if I spilled out everything I knew, then I would have a lot harder time doing my job, because then people are like, man, I didn't know you were going to say that. And that puts me in a bad spot because you da-da-da-da. I think it certainly applies to realignment. And don't misunderstand, I'm not saying I know everything that's going to happen with realignment. I do not. But I do try to clue my subscribers, my customers, in to what I think might happen. And so, I think it's important right now to think back to all the things that have happened over the last couple of months. You had the ACC expanded and added 3 schools, far-flung schools from other regions. You've had Florida State kicking and screaming and saying they were, ready to leave and prepared to leave. And you've had Clemson and Florida State and North Carolina voting against that expansion. That is a big deal, because any governing body, whether it's a board of trustees or a membership of a conference or whatever, you're going to hash out your disagreements, and you're going to have conflict and strife, but it's ideally going to be private, and you're going to hash all that out, and then you're going to vote, and it's going to be unanimous, right? Publicly. So you're going to present a united front. The fact that that the ACC was not unanimous on that that's significant. That is really significant. And so, I picked up, and the reason I go back to August is you probably also remember the August 15th deadline. I think in early August, it sort of became a sensation when that got out that, Florida State and possibly Clemson would have to give notice if they want to play in another conference by 2024. They would have to give notice by August 15th. And so there was a great clamor over that, oh man, is this going to happen, as the days neared. And so when August 15th came and went without anything happening, it was just assumed that, okay, well, now the next big date is next August 15th. So next summer is going to be really interesting because then you're going to have the same drum beats and the same questions. Well, I quickly learned around that time, as people who connected to the situation told me, next August 15th is not the date. Like the time to look out for is actually, much sooner. And so, and it would stand to, that would make sense because if again, hypothetically, if school A is interested in challenging the grant of rights and moving to another conference, then why would you not want the wheels to start turning on that as soon as possible? Because, to get that challenge going, a possibly long process going as far as that challenge goes. And so, but in an example of how stuff can get twisted, the stuff that you write get twisted. Back in August, I think I wrote, somebody asked, I think it was a mailbag that we do, and somebody asked, or no, actually it was on the message board. I'm sorry. Somebody asked me, they said, when do you, if you don't know when it's going to happen, what would be your best guess? And I said, I was just joking around. I said, Clemson and Florida State make an announcement on September 22nd at 10:30 a.m. the day before they play. And then during the game on the 23rd, Dabo Sweeney appears in a recorded message on the Jumbotron and whips everybody into a frenzy by saying, hey, let's everybody donate to the Get the Hell Out of the ACC fund and help us pay the exit fee or whatever. I mean, it was clearly a fictitious scenario. And I actually wrote about it later and just said it was tongue in cheek. Well, you fast forward a few weeks, and as the Florida State week is here, some people are like, hey, man, I thought you said something was going to happen this week. And I'm like, no, I did not say that. My point was, I have a feeling I'm going to be writing about a lot more than football this fall. And I maintain that here today on October 11th. And of course, that creates a frenzy of questions. Well, what do you mean? How is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? And where are we going? But I don't, and I've said this on the message board, this is not news. One thing would have to theoretically, hypothetically come before the other. I've never predicted an announcement of, Clemson's, we're leaving the ACC, we're going to this conference. I've never painted that picture. I believe that whatever happens, it would have to start with a challenge of the grant of rights. And I know people say that's semantics, that if you challenge the grant of rights, it means you're leaving the conference. I get that. But a lot of things can happen during that challenge. A judge could say, sorry, Clemson, you signed up for this. Throw it out. Yeah, I have no idea. I'm just talking hypotheticals. But I do think that, and I've said this also on our website, that there's a lot of confidence on Clemson's end. I don't think they know exactly where they might end up. There's a lot of confidence that they're going to be in a really good place long term. Yep,
we just have to keep on waiting. just a couple final questions before I let you go, and a couple little quick hitters here. But one of our listeners, who's also a Tiger Illustrated subscriber, he asked for me to ask. He said, if Larry was king for the day, what does he think this team's biggest problem is, and how would he handle it?
Oh, how would I handle it? Oh boy, that's tough. That is that's putting me that's way above my pay grade. I think the defense, and the story has yet to be told fully because we're at the halfway point. I like what I've seen from the defense. I was really skeptical after that Duke game about the defense because it was kind of lethargic and just not the fire-breathing, type of mentality that I thought I was going to see, from a group like that we'd been hearing about all off season. You hear Barrett Carter saying he realized in the first quarter that he was out of shape. It's like, wait, what? So I was skeptical, full disclosure, going into the Florida State game. I was like, I don't know if these guys can play big boy football, they're going to have to show me. So anyway, I think most of the issues are on the offensive side of the ball, and I think it starts up front. They got to find some way to get the running game going to where it's forceful enough and dependable enough to punish people for sitting back and play and drop 8, right? That's what you do. If somebody plays drop 8 to make you sort of navigate down the field and string drives together, you punish them by running the ball down their dang throats, and then you take them out of that. You force them out of that, and then you can get explosive plays. I actually have an article coming later this week on, so much has been made of turnover margin and all that, and rightfully so. I think explosive play margin is just as important for not just Clemson, but for everybody. Because if you have more explosive plays than the opposition, then you're going to be in position to win. You're going to win a lot of games. If you have more explosive plays, a lot of explosive plays on offense, you're not going to have 12 play drives, right? You're going to be able to score more quickly. And so on that topic, Clemson's defense has only allowed 2.83 explosive plays per game this year, and I define that as 20-plus yard plays per game. That's not only a great improvement from last year. At 4.28 was last year, 4.28 per game Clemson's defense allowed. It's the lowest of the entire CFP era for Clemson, and that, of course, includes the Brent Venables era. But the offense, 3.5 explosive plays a game, that's down from last year, 4.14, and way down from back in the Trevor Lawrence 6.75, 6.66, 6.93. Sorry to get so number heavy on you, but I think it really tells a story. How do I generate more explosive plays? If I'm in charge, I get that running game going. I figure that out. I probably settle on Harris Sewell at right guard. I ride with him. This is a great time to do that in the open date. And if I'm Garrett Riley, I come up with some more creative ways to run the ball with this extra time, and just get to where it's just more punch and more consistency with that, because that opens up so much more, whether it's the play action game or whether it gets people out of that shell coverage that Wake Forest played and that Duke played the first game of the year.
Absolutely. And then one final question for you here, and it could be a fact or fiction, or fact or fiction, does Clemson continue its 10-win streak this season?
Man, tough ones. It's wild. Everything's such a week-to-week thing, these swings, So if you asked me that last week, or ask anybody that, on the high that came out after seeing the offense do what it did against Syracuse, it's like, yeah, of course. And now it's like, oh, I don't know, man. So I'm gonna go yes. If you also give me the bowl game as an opportunity to get another one of those wins, but I don't know, man. This is a tough team, a tough program to read. I don't want to say program. I want to say team, because they're so young in some areas. And I think that if this were 2021, year one after Trevor Lawrence, I think there'd be a whole lot more sort of, I don't know, optimism, invigoration of, okay, I can see where this is headed with Cade Klubnik, getting better and progressing, not just later into this year, but next year. And then all those freshmen, man, these freshmen have some real juice on both sides of the ball. But I think that since this year is after 2 disappointing years, it's like, like, and they have 2 losses, so it's like, those are the things I think about, man, during the week when you ask me about process, but that's the latest thing on my mind is like, what if this were year one post Trevor Lawrence? Would we have a different view of it and a view of sort of the upside, the long-term upside? Would there be more excitement? So there are layers and layers and layers of questions about this program right now that I think are fair. But you're probably out of time, so we could maybe save that for another podcast if you want to.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely an up and down ride week to week. You play a tough Florida State team, and I don't know, I left the stadium feeling confident. But Larry, thank you again for joining us. Really appreciate it. To our listeners, make sure if you're not a member of Tiger Illustrated, go join. The great content there, and definitely give the Dubcast a listen. So thank you, Larry.
Hey, and thank you, and thank your questioner for being on Tiger Illustrated. Like it's awesome. Like I have enormous gratitude, and all 3 of us do. Chris and Paul and I do, that y'all give us your money, and that you support us and believe in us. It's just it's a wonderful thing. So we really appreciate it.
Absolutely, thank you.
All right, thanks to Larry for joining the show. Always great having him on. Great insight. And if you don't already, go subscribe to Tiger Illustrated. They're the best in the business, I believe. Matthew, I can't remember if it was on the podcast or if it was back when we were running our website. I think it was the website. You wrote an article about the differences between TigerNet people and Tiger Illustrated people.
I've completely forgot about that, but yes, I did do that. I kind of felt like there was some beef and a superiority complex from one of the sides towards the other.
Yeah. Definitely 2 different groups of people, but they do great work over there at Tiger Illustrated. The in-game threads are a must read. So you get the good, the bad, the ugly on there. And Larry and Chris Ard and Paul Strelo do a great job. So check them out. All right. Fact or fiction?
Fact or fiction?
All right. Fact or fiction? Sparse crowds in the waning moments of the second half is a sign of poor fan support.
I'm saying fiction here. Nobody deserves to have to sit through 4 hours of Clemson and Wake Forest combining for 29 points. I wouldn't want my worst enemy to have to do that. So if somebody on that's in charge has a problem with it, then I'm shifting the blame back to you.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you too. I'm going to say fiction. I don't know if you saw the tweet that I put out. Someone posted a picture. I think it was with like 1 minute and 45 seconds left to go in the game of how sparse the crowd was. And I quote retweeted. I'm like, hey, this is a different college football now. These are paid athletes and they are a product. And then in your real life, you keep going back to the same restaurant that keeps screwing up your order. You get up and leave when the service is bad. I don't blame fans for leaving early. I was one of those fans this past week. In fact, the Florida State game is actually the only game that I've stayed the entire game this season. So
me too.
So no, I'm gonna say fiction here. Fact or fiction? Oklahoma under Brent Venables will be a more successful program than Clemson in this next decade.
I'm going to say fact here, but I don't really want to elaborate on it because I think it's pretty straightforward. Like, I think if you paid attention to Clemson football of the past decade, you should agree.
I want to say fact and agree with you. My only hesitation is them moving to the SEC. You saw how switching up conferences could affect schools. I mean, it didn't work out great for Texas A&M. They haven't done much since Johnny Manziel. Ironically, it benefited Missouri there for a little bit for a couple of years.
Yeah, Missouri won the East. The first year they were in the SEC East, Missouri came in and won.
Yeah, so I don't know how that transition will go. That'll be interesting to see Texas and Oklahoma in the SEC next year, and that's my only hesitation.
Yeah, I think it's
to say fact.
I think it's a little different because with A&M is a pretty big program, but you wouldn't call them a blue blood, and I think Texas and Oklahoma qualify as blue blood programs. So I think there's a little bit of a difference there that them moving to the SEC will improve their recruiting, and it might have lessened like Missouri's appeal to go there.
Yeah. Fact or fiction, Garrett Riley has underachieved through 6 games at Clemson this season.
This is big fiction to me. I think there's a lot more factors at play here other than Garrett Riley. I've been impressed with the new stuff we've seen Garrett bring to the table, but a few things, other factors, I'll just throw off a few. Dabo's nose in the play calling, that's problem number one. Poor position coaching is way more evident on the field than what Garrett Riley has been able to do in his short amount of time here. And I could probably keep going, but I'm going to try to keep this episode a little bit shorter.
On your point about Dabo and the Waffle House menu in his hand and putting his nose in the play calling, someone posted a thread about it, and it was someone just genuinely asking the question, hey, on this message board, I see people blaming play calling on Dabo, and it's Dabo running the offense, and Riley just gives his input and that kind of thing. And evidently there was another guy who posted something similar, but a little bit more to the point and vulgar and that kind of stuff. And he like called out the admin. He was like, I had this same exact thread up last week and it got taken down. And Chris Ard on the came in and laid it out. He's like, since you made this public, I'm going to respond to you in public, and just buried the dude for all the reasons they took this thread down. He's like, we don't get many emails about complaints of people on this message board, and we constantly get complaints about you. And it was hilarious. But on this one, I'm gonna say fiction as well. I agree with you. I think there's a lot of other factors at play here. I don't know that I necessarily subscribe to the Dabo meddling with the play calling there. I don't know. Obviously, he does have the play call sheet there, and I don't know. I think he just likes to have his hand in everything. I don't think he is as big of an issue as a lot of people, especially on message boards, think it is. But I say fiction. I think that I expected the offense to be gelling a little bit better and us have put up more points and looked better as an offense at this point. But I don't know that I think he's underachieved.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, from that thread you were talking about where people were kind of complaining about Dabo and the play calling, was there any like evidence, or sometimes on those TI threads there's like people with inside sources, quotes, big quotes.
There was some guy claiming to play golf with somebody from in the program, and he said that Dabo told Riley that this is my offense and put in it, but that just doesn't sound believable to me. At least on that thread, it was more about people like freaking out, like, oh, you're about to get jumped down by all these people, and that thread ended up being more comical than anything. But there have been threads before where people make those claims. I can't remember what their arguments are or why they believe that. Your dad would probably know better than I do.
We'll have to get him on, or ask him when we get him on, maybe for another season finale episode like last year.
Yeah, wrap up the season with old Gerald again. Let's review our Week 6 picks.
Weekly picks.
All right, week 6, another week in the books. Matthew had a little bit of improvement this week. I'm still staying steady with one correct game a week. Matthew got 2 picks right this week. He got his favorite and his underdog. Only one I got was my over. That brings the season total to 11 points in favor of Matthew and 10 points for myself. Any comments or thoughts on your picks, Matthew?
No, like I said, sorry I did not get to watch much football this weekend, but I am getting closer to getting back on track. I think I went undefeated, or I went 4-0, 3-1, 1-3, 1-3, 0-4, and now I'm back to 2-4. So we're starting the climb back up to perfect.
Yeah, I need to head that direction myself. I was really bummed about that Notre Dame Louisville game. The under was 52, and I believe the final point total was 53.
Yeah, it was.
And then the LSU Mizzou game ended up being a 10-point loss there. I took Mizzou plus 6.5. And Arizona, with the surprise of the week, playing USC tough there. And one other game I forgot to even mention up top when we were reviewing games. I don't know anything about the game other than Colorado struggled. I believe it was an overtime game. They win by 1 point. You got Shedeur Sanders going and mocking the student section, pointing to his wrist. And some of that stuff is I know I said that I have no issue with Coach Prime and all of them and all that. And I don't know. I'm just getting so tired of it. You beat a party school that doesn't care anything about football by 1 point. I think it was a 3-touchdown spread, and I don't know. I'm getting tired of it.
It is. I can see like how you might get like a little annoyed by it, but it's kind of funny too at the same time. I mean, and to be fair, Shedeur Sanders is leading the NCAA in passing yards right now, so he's personally doing enough to showboat like that. I just think it's so funny that like a college kid is flexing on other college kids with like a diamond studded watch. I think that's funny.
Yeah, dude's got a Rolls Royce too, doesn't he?
I don't know. I don't pay that much attention to the off the field stuff, but it wouldn't be surprised. I mean, it's kind of like, it's not like Shedeur Sanders like came from the mud or anything. Like his dad is one of the greatest athletes ever.
But as far as getting back to our picks, as far as this past week's picks go, I'm ready to turn the page and hopefully take a step forward like you did this past week and even them out. So let's get into our picks for week 7. Should be a stress-free week with no Tiger football. I'm going to be in Charleston and have no plans other than to watch football all day Saturday.
That sounds good. I might go to Atlanta this weekend and not watch football, but we'll see how that plays out. But moving on to this week's picks, I am going with UNC at Miami for my favorite pick. UNC's favored by 3.5 right now on the road at Miami. And after the poor showing from Miami this past weekend, and UNC had a really good showing against Syracuse, I'm expecting the momentum to keep moving in the same direction for both of those teams.
I considered that pick here, but I am going to I messed up my formatting. I can't get it to. Technology is defeating me right now. I'll just throw out my pick without highlighting it. I went going with Texas A&M at Tennessee. Tennessee is a 3-point favorite in Knoxville against the Aggies.
That'll be interesting to see. Moving over to underdog, I was really surprised when I saw this one on the my bookie website as the line, but Washington is currently favored at Oregon -2.5, so I'm going Oregon +2.5 as the underdog here. I'm not too sure where that line came from.
I'm really excited about that game this week. I'm sticking with the SEC. Auburn is an 11-point underdog in Death Valley against LSU. The way the Tigers played against the Bulldogs, LSU does not look like the team it looked like in week 1. So I'm going with the Tigers here.
Yeah, which one? Which Tigers?
War Eagle, Auburn.
I guess I got it from the War Eagle, but you kept saying Tigers, and I'm like, They're both.
I wouldn't even consider an LSU, honestly.
They're not the real Tigers anymore. But I'm also going to stay in the ACC for or SEC, I mean, for my over, and going U of SC at Florida. That's plus or minus 51 right now, and I think both of those offenses are going to get moving.
I'm going out west, UCLA against Oregon State. The over-under set at 54 points. Both of these teams have put up a lot of points this season, so kind of threw me off with a number that low. Especially Oregon State, they've done pretty well in the points department.
Yeah, I mean, I like Oregon State a lot, and it's nice to see DJ balling. He had another good week this past week. So, last but not least, for my under, coming back to the ACC, I'm going Florida State at Syracuse. That's plus or minus 56.5. Syracuse gave up a lot of points last week. Florida State is kind of iffy on offense and defense sometimes, so wouldn't be surprised to see this one go under 56.5.
I too am going with Syracuse, Florida State, and piggyback off that. Syracuse has put up a lot of points at times this season, but when they have played better opponents, they have not. They've struggled to get some points. So I'm with you there, under 56. There will be no movement on this game for the two of us. All right. No game to preview this week. So I thought it'd be fun for Matthew and I to visit our preseason picks as far as over and under with win totals and our college football playoff predictions as well. So I went with South Carolina over 6.5 wins and am kicking myself for taking that. Their Gamecocks are currently 2-3. They had a bye week this past week. The only other gimme winnable games on their schedule are Jacksonville State and Vandy. They do have some pretty tough competition mixed in there as well.
Yeah, Vandy has even looked decent at points in the year, so that one might be a good game. But I feel like we're in a pretty similar spot right now from our preseason picks, because I went with Wake Forest. I did not look up what their current record is, but I know. Well, I guess they're 3-2 because they were 3-1 entering the game this past week. So they're 3-2. They have a really tough schedule looking forward. They talked about that on the broadcast if you watched on TV this past weekend, but they really need to pick up a win this week if they're going to get even close to the 6.5. So
for unders, I took Alabama under 10.5 wins. As of now, they are 5-1. They have Tennessee, LSU, Kentucky, and Auburn remaining. And Tennessee, LSU, and Kentucky are in 3 consecutive weeks. They wrap up the season, obviously, with Auburn. I still think this is in play for me at 10.5 for the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, I think it might be a little less likely. I thought we might have seen Alabama drop one of these games that they've already played, like to A&M or Ole Miss, but it's definitely still in play for that one. My under, I think, might still be on pace also. I went with Texas under 9.5 wins, and Texas did just lose their first game of the season, so I believe they're 4-1, so that should put them on pace to go 8-2 or 9-3, so I'm happy with where that's at.
I don't know. Unless they just completely crumble, I think, 9.5. For what we've seen out of them this season, 9.5 right now seems kind of low. But
yeah, you're right.
You never know how, especially in a rivalry game with Oklahoma like this, how that could affect them going forward.
Yeah, true. That's what I was kind of expecting going into the season, was for them to drop a game kind of like this and maybe lose your national championship aspirations a little bit.
Yeah. Our college football playoff picks, we each gave out 4 teams we thought would make the playoff, and then additionally gave our national champion. I threw out Georgia, Michigan, USC, and LSU. USC, Michigan, and Georgia all still in play. with the chance to go to the college football playoff.
Yeah, and I went a little bit different from you with Georgia, Penn State, Clemson, and Oklahoma, which 3 of my 4 are also still undefeated. And it's going to really determine, or the second half of the season is really going to determine where this goes, because a couple of our teams are matched up in, like Penn State and Michigan are matched up to play later in the season. So one of them is going to come true.
Yeah. And then laugh out loud at you picking Clemson, me picking LSU.
I mean, I kind of knew that it wasn't like a high probability, but from what we had talked about in our season preview episode is we were pretty high on this team coming into the season with the addition of Garrett Riley, and like we had mentioned earlier, we kind of thought the offense would be in a little bit better of a place at this point in the season. So that's why I was thinking that is just the regular season schedule for Clemson shaped up to be easier than usual, but we haven't made it look that way, at least.
Yeah, they had to make it more difficult than it needed to be. As far as national championship picks, as much as I talked about, it's inevitable that Georgia was going to go for a three-peat. I completely forgot. I thought I picked them to win the national championship, not until revisiting the episode 1 notes did I realize that I picked Michigan to win the national championship. So I guess that was maybe wishful thinking on my part, that maybe that would be the only team that could challenge to beat Georgia and prevent that three-peat, but still alive there.
Well, to be fair, Michigan has looked like the best team in the country to this point to me, so I think you're on point there. And I might be wrong in saying this, but I thought we might have had a discussion about you might have wanted to pick Georgia, but since I picked Georgia, you might have just went with Michigan for some variety, but I can't exactly remember.
All right, that wraps up episode 8. Thank you all for listening. We will return with the Twitter poll next week. We will have another Clemson game to preview as the Tigers will head to Miami. But enjoy the off week. It was full of a lot of college football. And remember, as always, if you don't follow Nachos and Analysis on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Threads, all of that to stay up to date and follow along, get your voice heard when we do those polls each week. But we'll talk to you next week. Peace.
Peace. And for the end of the episode, I am going to shout out the game on my TV. Today I'm watching Clemson versus Georgia 2013, one of my favorite Clemson games of all time.
That game was the very first game that Clemson switched to the new font in the end zones, and I remember being so excited about it, seeing it the night before. Nothing against the old font. I liked it when we had it, but then when I saw this new blockier font, I fell in love.
Oh yeah, once we I really like the branding with, I think it's not Times New Roman, but it's very similar font of what it used to be, but the Pawhammer font is great rebrand from Clemson football.
Yeah. Yeah, and as you mentioned, great game. That's one of my favorite games of all time.
Yeah, possibly my favorite game I've ever been to. Top 3 at least.